Well, good morning, folks. It's time to take a look at a couple of pretty decent-sized giant pumpkins up in Andover. My name's Hugh Wiberg, and I live on Middlesex Ave in Wilmington. You might recognize the name. I write the birding column for the Town Crier. And in my spare time, as one of my hobbies, I grow giant pumpkins. I used to grow giant pumpkins in Wilmington until about 10 years ago, but some of you may recall I had one, let's say, borrowed from my backyard, about a 400-pounder, and I said to my wife one day, I said, you know, I'm kind of a marked man in Wilmington. People know I grow these crazy giant pumpkins. I think I'm going to have to find a new place to grow them. I have a friend lives up in Andover, a young fellow by the name of Tom Cohn, who teaches biology at the Phillips Academy in Andover. And he and I got to talking one day, and he'd been trying to grow giant pumpkins too, without too much success. So he said to me, Hugh, why don't we combine what time we have, and we'll try to grow some pumpkins up on a spot that I have close by in Andover. So I said, fine, let's do it. So for the past 10 years, we've been up here and doing reasonably well. Our biggest pumpkin up to this year weighed 674 pounds, grown 3 years ago. Last year at the Topsfield Fair, we entered a pumpkin grown right here that weighed 666 pounds. And this year, we think we've got something a little better. This looks like our best year so far. And what we're going to do is take a walk down into the pumpkin patch here. What you're looking at now are, believe it or not, only 3 plants. We start out early in the spring with 3 plants spaced 25 feet apart. And by the end of the growing season, which is about where we're at now, those 3 plants have completely filled this area, which measures about 40 feet deep by 70 feet long. And out of that area, we have 2 pumpkins that we're pretty sure are well over 600 pounds, and one of them, which we believe may be approaching 775 pounds. So why don't we take a walk down into this area, and we'll get some close-up shots of what may be a couple of the larger pumpkins grown in New England this year. We hope to come in 4th or 5th, maybe out of 100 pumpkins at the Topsfield Fair a little later on in September. So let's take a little walk and see what we got down below. Okay, Tom, here we are over next to what we think is our 2nd largest giant pumpkin. These pumpkins, by the way, are a variety called Dill's Atlantic Giant, which is the only species of pumpkin that has the genetic background to be able to produce these monsters. And this pumpkin is, we think, in the order of 650 to 675 pounds, and it's still growing. Now, if you want to take a pan over here, you'll notice that we've got a blue, doesn't have to be blue, but this one is, cover on top of the pumpkin. The reason for that is these giant pumpkins don't like direct sunlight. So by the time they get to be about basketball size in June, we start putting a cover on the top of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this cover so you'll get a better idea of what this guy looks like. And the way to do that is, I think, probably to pull this right out of the ground. We're going to take the rest of the cover off here. This takes care of the early morning sunlight, and this takes care of the afternoon and evening sunlight. And that is where we're at right now. Now the stem attaches down in here somewhere, and it's still connected to this very large plant that goes up this way. So it's still taking water and nutrients out of the ground and getting, we hope, bigger and bigger and bigger. Now the other night we put a tape measure around the circumference of this pumpkin, and it measured 138 inches around, which means that, according to our experience, that this guy is somewhere in the order of 660 pounds. We think it has a shot of getting to 700 pounds before the season's over. Now, I thought it might be interesting, Tom, getting a little picture from the back here. For size perspective, I put my sunglasses on top of the pumpkin just so people can get a pretty good idea of how big that pumpkin really is. Maybe you can zoom in on that a little bit. Be sure we can see the glasses on the top. But that's a decent pumpkin. If I were to guess right now, and if we entered this pumpkin, which is our 2nd largest pumpkin, I believe this pumpkin would probably come in 5th or 6th at the Topsfield Fair later in September. Okay, let's take a quick walk up beside this pumpkin. I got to retrieve my glasses here anyway. Here we go. I want to give this guy a little pat for good luck here. Ask it to keep on growing. This should add another 30 or 40 pounds before we harvest it, hopefully. Now what I'd like to do is take a walk over to our right and take a look at what the pumpkin that we think is our biggest one, which is probably 100 pounds heavier than this guy. So I'm going to take a walk over in this direction. Okay, now we've moved over here about 25 feet into our number 1 patch. And this is where we have a pumpkin that we will probably take to the Topsfield Fair a little later on in September. Once again, this blue tarp is to keep the direct sunlight off. I'm going to remove that so we can get a good look at it here. Well, the way to do that is to pull that stick out for a minute. I can always put it back. There we go. We call this pumpkin Big Bertha. We've never had anything quite this big before. We'll get some different angle shots here in a minute so you can see just how big this pumpkin really is. But we put the tape measure around this a couple of days ago, and it measures 156 inches in circumference, which indicates, based on our past experience, a pumpkin that should weigh in the high 700s. So it feels nice and thick. It's got a nice heavy thunk to it. You see a little dust on the pumpkin here. We powder them from time to time with an all-purpose garden insecticide and fungicide to encourage the woodchucks to stay off in the woods where they belong. We haven't had any rodent or woodchuck damage this year, thank you God. So far so good, we're looking good. We got about another couple of weeks before the Topsfield Fair weigh-off. But this is the baby that's going up there, and we're hopeful that we will be in the top 5. The competition is very, very tough every year. I know of some very large other pumpkins around New England. We don't expect to win, but we do expect to be very respectable, let's put it that way. Okay, now you've got a close-up of this pumpkin that we think may be approaching 775 pounds. Tom, the cameraman, has put his reading glasses on top of the pumpkin to help you get a little bit of size perspective from it. And we think with this nice warm weather early in September, we have a chance of this pumpkin getting up pretty close to 800 pounds. Time will tell on that. Tom, there are about, I would guess, 400 or 500 very serious growers of giant pumpkins in New England. I'm just one of a great number that compete at the Topsfield Fair every year on the first day of the fair. And with the help of 4 or 5 other strong back, weak mind types like myself, we're going to get in here with a giant tarpaulin and take the heaviest of these pumpkins out of here, wrestle it up that hill over there, and somehow get it onto the back of a pickup truck. Well, it's early September now, Tom, and we got 2 weeks to go before we have to get these pumpkins out of here to take the biggest one up to the Topsfield Fair. That's going to be a problem because how do you move a 780-pound pumpkin? You round up a lot of other guys and get help. You roll it into a tarpaulin, and on the count of 3, everybody lifts, and you hope nobody springs their back muscles. And that's how you get it out of the patch and onto the truck. So it's about 2 weeks from weigh-off time right now. The weigh-off date at the Topsfield Fair is Saturday, September 29. And whether or not these pumpkins get any bigger than this between now and then, it's in the hands of the gods. A lot will depend on how much rain we get from now and then, between now and then. But we'll cross our fingers and see what happens at Topsfield, and maybe we get back to you early in October and let you know what happened.